Moving on to chapter 33. I saw the flickering glow of the lantern as someone lit it in the pastor's study. Heard the voices of Lieutenant Peavy and Mr. Pickens, and didn't give a rip if I wasn't there to provide the details. I slipped out the back door, closing it softly behind me, and took my life in my hands to cross the sleet-covered parking lot by myself. My galoshes flapped against my shins as I made my way toward Mr. Johnson's truck, looming like a behemoth between me and my house. Etta Mae was nowhere to be seen, so she'd managed the icy area without mishap. More's the pity, I thought. I didn't customarily wish harm to anybody, but this was a special case since it meant harm to me and mine. As I reached the front of the truck, I steadied myself by holding on to the grill, resting while I looked across the street where Etta Mae's car was parked, and then up at my house. Blood pounded in my ears as I pictured what was going on in there by the dim light. A shadow suddenly moved in front of me, scared me so bad I nearly lost my breath and my hold on the truck. "Who's that?" It's just me, Curtis said. "You all right?" "Lord, Curtis," I said, gasping with relief. "You scared me half to death. What are you doing out here?" "Got worried when those men came to the house looking for y'all. Then when we saw the cop cars, I came out to see what was going on and to check on the truck. Want me to walk you in?" No, that's all right. You keep on doing what you're doing. I'll manage." I walked out onto the sanded street where the footing was surer, not wanting to be held up on my mission. Halfway across, I turned around with a sudden idea of how to turn Etta Mae's attention away from Sam. "Curtis," I called, "are you a race truck driver too?" "No, ma'am, I'm a fabricator." "That'll do. She won't know the difference. Did you see that young woman come across just a minute ago?" "Yes, ma'am, she was in a hurry and didn't stop. Went on in the house." "She's young, single at the moment, and somewhat attractive. At least some people think so. Would you be amenable to distracting her for a little while? You could bring her out here and show her Mr. Johnson's truck, maybe." And although I don't usually hold with such tactics, I think a little innocent dalliance might be called for. She's quite lonely and could use some attention. Even in the dark, I saw his quick grin. "I'm a married man, Miss Springer, for all of 3 months, so I better pass if it's all the same to you." I threw up my hands and started again for the house. At least I'd tried for an end run, and now I'd have to tackle her head on. When I opened the front door, I wasn't a bit surprised to see the little hussy sitting on the arm of Sam's chair. It just burned me up. I ignored Sam's call to me as I took off my coat and headscarf. This was between me and Etta Mae Wiggins. "'Bout time you got back here," Lillian said, cocking her head toward Sam's chair. "I expect you 'bout froze." "No," I started, my mouth a thin line as I thought that I was as far from being frozen as I'd ever been. "Julia!" Luann jumped up from her chair. "What's going on over at the church? People knocking on the door and the sheriff's over there? We were worried to death. Is Jerry all right? Where is he? When's he coming back?" "Jerry's fine, Luann. Sit down. Miss Wiggins took good care of him, didn't you, Etta Mae?" Luann narrowed her eyes, not liking that at all. "Sam, you should be in bed. Lillian, let's help him up. He needs his rest." Etta Mae gave me an innocent smile. "Oh, there's no need of that. I'll be taking him on home in a minute. That's why I put chains on my car and followed the snowplow over here. Couldn't let my favorite patient get stranded, could I?" She reached down and patted his knee. "I'd hardly say he was stranded. Besides, he doesn't need to spend the night by himself with neither heat nor lights." "Oh," she said, looking at me with wide-eyed innocence, "I'd never leave my patient in his shape by himself. I'll stay with him till James gets there in the morning." "I hardly think that's advisable. Where's your cane, Sam? You're going to bed right here." "Julia," Sam started, but I hushed him with a look. I meant for him to stay out of this. "He needs to be in his own bed," Etta Mae said, like only she knew what he needed. "He's got his pillows to prop his cast on, and a bed rail to pull up on. He'll be more comfortable there." Don't tell me where he'll be more comfortable. I could not control the surge of anger at the little know-it-all, and I'd appreciate it if you'd get off the arm of that chair. It wasn't made to be sat on. She jumped up like a shot while Luann and Lillian looked at me with their mouths open. It certainly wasn't like me to be discourteous, but these were special circumstances. Besides, she'd started it. Sam had the strangest expression on his face while this was going on, sitting there enjoying being fought over, as it was plain to see he was doing. I could have wrung his neck. I marched over to him, paying no mind to Etta Mae, who'd edged out of my way. I sat down on the footstool by Sam's wounded leg and said, "Sam, it's bad out there, and if you don't want the other leg broken, you'll stay right here tonight." "Well, Julia," he said, taking my hand, his eyes shining from the reflection of the fire, "if you put it that way." I looked up in triumph at Etta Mae, only to catch the edge of a smile as she turned away. Now, why would she be doing that when she'd just been put in her place? Saving face is important to some people, and I didn't care how she managed it. I had what I wanted. Knowing I could now afford to be gracious, I said, "Have a seat on the sofa, Miss Wiggins, and get yourself warm before you have to leave. I certainly appreciate your dedication to your patients, but as you can see, Sam is well taken care of." "Yes, ma'am," she said, just as docile as I could want. "You just have to stand up to the likes of her." Footsteps sounded on the porch as Hazel Marie, Mr. Johnson, and Mr. Pickens and Curtis came in with a lot of stomping and laughing and just plain noise. "It's over, Miss Julia," Hazel Marie said, smiling as she came over to clasp my hands with her cold ones. "Or almost over. All that's left is to get back to the clerk of court's office first thing Monday and make sure Brother Vern withdraws his complaint. When he's done that, the snatch and grab order for little Lloyd will be thrown out. Then all I have to do is go in and sign the statement I just made to Lieutenant Peavy about Bigelow and Wilson T. I have to say that Lieutenant Peavy was real happy to hear my story. He was just as nice as he could be." "Well, make sure you get your charm back from him," I told her. "I can't imagine he'd want to keep it." "Oh, I will. It nearly killed me to damage my bracelet." She held her arm up so that the remaining charms jangled and sparkled. "I'm so relieved, Miss Julia, because Mr. Pickens took up for me and explained everything to Lieutenant Peavy. I'm out of it now, and Bigelow and Wilson T. were arrested and put in jail where they belong." "Taken in for questioning," Mr. Pickens corrected her. "But they'll have some explaining to do, especially after the Rockingham cops get in on the act." Hazel Marie leaned close in and whispered to me, "I tried to get them to take Brother Vern in too, but they wouldn't." She gave me a wicked grin. "I'm going to tear him up if he doesn't withdraw that complaint, and he knows it. He won't have a congregation left by the time I get through telling the world what kind of preacher he is. He won't ever try to get his hands on little Lloyd or his inheritance again." "That's the spirit, Hazel Marie," I said, patting her hand. "And I don't think we'll have any trouble getting Pastor Ledbetter to testify to the good home you and I have provided for little Lloyd. And if that's not enough, we'll have Mr. Pickens and Mr. Johnson testify to your good character. Why, it wouldn't surprise me a bit if the judge turns out to be a NASCAR fan, too." She smiled and leaned her head against my shoulder until Mr. Johnson's loud mouth broke up the moment. "Guess we took care of them," he announced, throwing his coat in the air. "I wouldn't have missed it for the world. Now I want to shake the hand of this little gal." He headed straight for Etta Mae, a big, goofy grin on his face. "Come here, you little honey. I got to get you in the light so I can see what I got. Might even have to give you a great big kiss. Good dog, where'd you learn to fight like that?" Etta Mae grinned right back at him. "Fighting off men who are too big for their britches, like you." Well, that just delighted Mr. Johnson, and he showed it by grabbing her up and swinging her around, putting my furnishings and general decor into jeopardy. But wouldn't you know it, and I hoped Sam noticed, she'd turned her attention entirely onto Mr. Johnson. Women like that always take up with any man within arm's reach. Luann didn't like it. I could tell she was fuming at Etta Mae's sudden elevation in Mr. Johnson's esteem. Even though I had no use for Etta Mae at all, I had to be gratified that she was taking Mr. Johnson's mind off Luann, and Luann could tell she'd lost to a younger model. You could see it eating at her. Jealousy is such an unattractive trait, don't you think? "J.D.," Mr. Johnson cried, turning away from his current interest. "Now you got these folks up to speed, when you gonna take up my case? We got to get on the road soon as the interstates are clear if we're gonna make Phoenix. But no use me going if my lucky charm's still missing. I tell you what's a fact. I was hoping Bigelow had it and we could wring it out of him, but don't look like he does. What with the way he's been looking high and low." "Yeah," Mr. Pickens said. "He wouldn't have risked coming back here if he had it. He'd be in Phoenix by this time instead of the county jail. No, he doesn't have it." And Wilson and Hodge didn't strike me as the type to hold out for long against Bigelow. I figure somebody else got it from him and either has gone on ahead or is still around here somewhere. He put his arm around Hazel Marie's waist, smiled down at her, and said, "I'm good at finding things, though. Just look what I came up with on my last case." That comment didn't seem to give Mr. Johnson any particular reassurance, and I can't say I blamed him. I was stretched to It was a stretch to compare Hazel Marie to any kind of lucky charm to my way of thinking, but I was ready to totally discount Mr. Pickens' investigative technique. I wasn't ready, to totally discount Mr. Pickens' investigative techniques since they've proven somewhat helpful in Hazel Marie's case. Although when you came right down to it, if it hadn't been for me and little Lloyd, he'd still have been looking for her. I turned to point this out to Mr. Johnson, but the lights flickered, came on, and the furnace clicked on in the basement. Everybody blinked and looked around, smiling at having our modern conveniences back at work. Candlelight and open fires were all well and good in their place, but I could do without them in the ordinary course of events. "Well, thank the Lord," Lillian said. "And Duke Power," I added. End of chapter 33.